Welcome so much to this roundtable discussion and welcome to the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Douagi and I'm the host of this roundtable discussion between you brilliant young minds and Professor Sir David Macmillan, Nobel laureate in chemistry 2021. We are recording this session from a beautiful Nobel Prize Museum in Stockholm during the Nobel Week. This is a week where we celebrate science, literature, and peace work, all for the benefit of humankind. With Minds of the Future, we hope to take you on a journey to explore how science can contribute to our future in areas that are on top of the mind from the youth perspective. Together with UNICEF, we have compiled data from all over the world to bring forward and highlight young people's voices. Minds of the Future is a part of the Stockholm International Youth Science Seminar that is hosted by the Swedish Federation of Young Scientists since 1976. The Stockholm International Youth Science Seminar is a multidisciplinary seminar and week, inspiring youth to science and highlighting some of the most remarkable achievements by young scientists around the world. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. And I would like to ask you all to say your name and your field and your country. And I can start with myself. So my name is Anna Sjöström Douagi. I am the Vice President for Strategic Initiatives at the Nobel Foundation, and I have a PhD in immunology. And then we start with Ben.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben Clegg. I'm from the UK, from a small town just north of Manchester. I studied my bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering at the University of Leeds, and now I'm studying for a medical engineering PhD in the far north of Sweden in Luleå.
Hi everyone, my name is Asmi Kumar. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I go to school at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in Boston in the United States. And I'm currently studying computer science and engineering as a first-year student.
Hi everyone, my name's Jordan Partington. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I go to the University of Melbourne where I did my Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, and now I'm doing my Master's in Analytical Chemistry.
Hi, my name is Meda Surdokeita, and I am from Lithuania. Currently, I am a first-year student in Kaunas University of Technology, and since I'm a first-year student, I don't really get to do much work there. But I did join the research group team with Professor Vytautas Gatotis.
Hi, I'm Ishan. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I'm studying at the University of Cambridge for my PhD in physics, and I do my research at the Nanophotonics Center there.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm from Switzerland, and I'm currently studying veterinary medicine in the first year. But what I bring to this table today is a bit of experience or practical experience in scientific communication.
Hello, hola todos. I am Hector Martinez. I am from Monterrey, Mexico, a city in the north of Mexico, and I'm beyond excited and just overall interested in all things related to medicine and biochemistry.
Hi, I'm Xiao Qing from Singapore, and I just graduated high school, so I don't really have a specific field yet, but I am planning to study physics in the future.
Hi, my name is Bertram. I have no formal education besides high school, but I have done computer science for the last 10 years within the field of cybersecurity, helping experts build the tools to handle and tackle the cyber attacks of tomorrow. I'm from Denmark, so just a neighboring country.
Hello, my name is Hassan Aftab. I'm from Lahore, Pakistan, and I'm currently doing a PhD in Earth Sciences with a focus on air pollution.
Hello, everybody. I'm Noelia Ares, and I'm really excited to be here today. I come originally from Spain, where I have a background of health biology, but a year ago I moved to the north of Sweden, and I am currently doing a master's in biomedicine, and I'm involved in cancer research.
Thank you so much. What a group. I'm really excited to hear your voices very soon. And then I will go to you. So who are you and why did you get the Nobel Prize?
Who am I? Who am I and why am I here?
Yeah.
My name is David Macmillan. I was from Scotland. I got the Nobel Prize in 2021 in chemistry, and it was for a thing called asymmetric organocatalysis, which is a big mouthful. And what it basically means is, with all of Benjamin Lish, we were awarded the Nobel Prize for developing a new field of catalysis in chemistry, which is sustainable and has been employed towards the production and discovery of drugs, medicines, materials, and many other things.
Thank you so much. Now we know who are around the table, and we are soon ready to start. Some small background I will share with you. Youth, as you know, have always been a central part of every society, and yet it is a group whose voices have often been disregarded. But this is changing, however, in the last years. In the last decades, the potential of youth contribution to society and science have gotten stronger. Greta Thunberg here in Sweden started a climate revolution with her school strikes in 2018. And Malala Yousafzai got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 for her activism for girls' right to education, and she was only 17 years old. And in a report from UNICEF, where youths in Europe and Africa were asked about key topics affecting their future, 34% responded to be a member of some sort of NGO, and 27% to take part in some kind of youth organization. So the youths are coming, I would say. So we look very much forward to today's discussion. Welcome to part one of the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Douagi, and I'm the host of this roundtable discussion between young minds in science and Professor Sir David Macmillan, Nobel laureate in chemistry from 2021. And this is taking place at the Nobel Prize Museum during the Nobel Week 2022 in Stockholm. We move here to one of the first questions, and one of the largest challenges for the next generation is the climate crisis. This is something that children and youth worry about all around the globe, and that's something that youth take very seriously and also shoulder responsibility to solve. To be able to solve the climate-related threats, we have to create more opportunities for young people to gain skills and knowledge required to come up with solutions to solve the climate-related challenges we stand before. 30% of youths in Africa and Europe stated that lack of knowledge and skills was the biggest challenge to transit into an economy that respects and protects the environment. So how can we empower today's youth and inspire them towards STEM and STEM innovation so that they can take on where we are today and create the future solutions to today's climate issues? Someone wants to start? Maybe Xiaoxin?
Right. So I think especially because climate change is such a prevalent issue for STEM and in the future. So I think one way to empower youth now is to probably update the way that STEM is being taught in schools to kind of include more climate issues. So I'm not sure how it's done elsewhere, but at least in Singapore, in our A-level syllabus, especially in chemistry, we do have quite a lot of focus on like climate issues. For example, learning about how CFCs deplete the ozone layer, or like how catalytic converters work. But I felt that more like focus can be put onto these climate issues in like physics lessons or chemistry lessons or biology lessons, because it's important for youth to be like exposed to this early, and so that even if they don't become scientists in the future, like everyone is aware of how their actions impact climate change. Yeah.
I think that's a very good point that you made with including it in more subjects. What I think would also help maybe, well, for the youth who have education accessible, I think that's also a big point. It's not accessible everywhere, but for the youth who are as privileged as that, to not only include problems and also maybe aspects of the climate crisis in different subjects, maybe also economics, politics, or even languages, to also focus on problem-based learning, where you can try and tackle a certain problem during your lessons and work on solutions with just basic knowledge, because I think that really motivates you and in your way of in your education and maybe your way of research later, if you start to find little bits of if you can like tackle or if you can find parts of solutions with just really basic knowledge.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I mean, I could echo Xiaoqing's statement that we need to focus on the early education and grassroots of the sustainability and how we learn about everything. And as a medical engineer, I mean, I suffer from a bit of climate anxiety research, where I always think, what's the point of doing my research if there's these massive problems going on in the background? Always thinking about, all the issues that we have. So to give my perspective, I've always had an interest in kind of making my project sustainable or going down that direction, but I had to seek them out personally. It wasn't offered to me like as a student. It was you can do this project, and I would kind of push it towards a sustainability viewpoint. And we, as Xiaoqing was saying, we focus on how we deal with fossil fuels and all the negative outcomes, and we should really focus on the positivity and what we can do with the alternatives, and how we can look towards being more positive on the sustainability front, what we can do, the possibilities. I think there was a really good example recently in 2018, the Day X in Cape Town, where they were running out of water, and the whole city came together. It was a great example of decisiveness and togetherness, and the whole city came together and showed what we can do as humans in extreme circumstances and pressure. But we shouldn't have to get to that point. We should be able to change the systematic kind of way that we teach people to prevent this, and kind of have more education pathways towards sustainability. And I think promoting a positive image is really important.
It's interesting what you say. You talk, all of you talk about education in different ways, accessibility to education, but also to bring in this sustainability angle in projects, and also this having many disciplines attacking these issues. David, what education, accessibility to education, do you think is the ground for solving these problems in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that has to be the case. If you think about our understanding, both locally or broadly, generally, it has to be based on our knowledge, our understanding of what are the problems, whether it's climate change, whether it's in the medical fields, whether it's in almost any sort of form of topics that society generally cares about. We have to have broad education of it. I absolutely agree that I believe that was a completely perfect statement, that in, for example, chemistry, physics, other areas, we don't talk about climate change in the ways that we can think about how we can overcome this for the future. There are actually aspects of this which are being tackled right now, I think, in a very positive way that most people don't know about. There's also many aspects of it which are not being tackled, and we don't do we do a terrible job of educating people as to the key problems associated with climate change and the absolute scale of it, which is so enormous. That's one of the biggest problems. My personal viewpoint is that we can and should educate many people as to not just having a sentiment about caring about climate change, but having a sentiment about why we have to push politicians, governments, people broadly to provide the resources to tackle the major problems of it, not the part about, I'm going to know how to put my can in a different recycling bin. That's different from actually understanding how do we actually scrub carbon out of the atmosphere, and how do we actually move towards renewables, which are much more important and bigger topics. But there's absolutely, you can feel it, there's a sentiment amongst especially young people that we have to address this. And I think that's why it's so important that we get that education right.
I mean, these are really important points that you are raising. And I think when you talk about education in climate change and sustainability, it's also new knowledge that takes some time to get into the school and education system, as we saw also with health and the pandemic, where new science was developing in front of our eyes, and then to get that into education, it's quite difficult. But there was apparently a quote from you, David, saying that science is supposed to be about having fun. It is not supposed to be about intimidating people.
Right.
I think we are a little bit coming into this education and also attracting young people to go into a scientific career. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on this? Why do you think it's important to talk about this?
I think it's number one component of this is it's important to be, climate change, for example, is a very serious issue. And so it's almost a case that people feel like you cannot talk about this without being incredibly serious. At the same time, you have to motivate people to care about either doing research, moving into that area, and actually being involved with these substantial questions, the number one way that you can get young people or any people excited about any topic is engagement where they feel excited about what they're doing. If you can be involved and be excited about it, which I would say is having fun, when you're excited, you're having fun, then your own pull towards that area is so much stronger. As scientists, and this will maybe go back to scientific communication, we don't do a fantastic job of engaging particularly the youngest people as they're learning a subject, for them to realize how much excitement, how fun it is to learn about that area. If anything, we do a bad job. We make it seem uninteresting or dry. And I think this idea of young people who can understand that doing research, being at the forefront of a scientific field is extraordinarily exciting. That is something we have to do a much better job of conveying to people to get many more people driven to get involved.
This excitement when you actually make an experiment and you find data that you know that no one published, so maybe no one else has ever heard about that. It's quite a nice feeling, actually.
Yeah, I mean, for this, I'll give you an example. This year, we took 6 high school kids into my lab for the summer, and the first thing we did with them is we had them make a molecule that had never been made in the universe before, each of them, and they couldn't believe it. They were like, really? This has never happened before? Like, yeah, and to take a 16-year-old and tell them they just created matter that's never existed in the universe before is so eye-opening for them. And you realize what you're trying to do is to show them that you can get to the frontier of the field really, really quickly. And it actually doesn't take that much buy-in or intellectual knowledge to get there. And I think conveying that to everyone is really important.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you around the table here, do you agree with David, or do you have any own experience of this on how to make this? And do you also want to say something to the young people who are watching?
Yeah, so I would like to share. Yes, I think it's important to make science accessible for youngers, because we see science, when people talk, we see it as really serious stuff, and something serious, it doesn't really go along with young kids, young youth, and we should break this boundary by making science more accessible. For example, that's really inspiring to hear that you took 16-year-olds to your lab, because from where I come from, it's Lithuania, and we don't do that. Science is usually just for the school, and you get to learn, but you don't get to experience and to show your passion and share your passion with it. And I think that accessibility should be the key how to encourage young people, because we have the passion and we have ideas. We see that because we need to live in that world that comes, I guess, after you. So we have the passion and we have the ideas, and we would like to get the knowledge and the place where we could grow, and don't wait for 30 years old, because we can do it now.
Great, thank you so much. So more young people into the labs. Bertram.
Yeah, I think too that, David, you're really hitting the nail on the head when you say that science has to be fun. I think we have to aim to make it engaging, because it is, I know I can, and I know 99.9% of people cannot use their whole life, spend it on something that they do not feel it's worth it, is engaging, and is something they want to actively partake in. If you don't feel like that, it's never gonna happen. And therefore, it's essential that we make science not just practical and have a real world impact, but fun. I'm not sitting here today because I'm some smart genius who knows everything about computers and stuff like that. I'm sitting here today just because I couldn't give up on programming. I think it's every time I don't know what to do, I sit down and I do some of it because I love it. I love doing it. When I get home from this week, tired after a whole week with a lot of wonderful people and wonderful experiences, that's probably going to be the first thing I sit down and do again, because I feel my passion. I burn for it, and we have to make young people feel that about science, because if we do that, they will be able to tackle the problems of tomorrow.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's a fantastic thing that you are lifting the passion. So every one of you, you're sitting on chairs from the Nobel Prize Museum, and under them there are signatures from laureates. So you're actually sitting on laureates. But one of the chairs is saying that follow your passion, and I think that is something that really, from many laureates, I hear that you really. There is a question. You almost get the prize because you are the most curious people in the world. That's something that connects you. You don't give up on a question, and you're really passionate to find an answer on that and to work on that.
Yeah, I can't speak for all the other laureates. I can speak for myself and say that it was, going back to Bertram's statement, I think it has to be, I always tell young people, sample lots of different areas so that you can find the thing you burn for, so that you can find the thing you care about. But the only way you can do that is to try lots of different things. But once you get it, it sort of almost speaks to you. I always tell people, I didn't choose organic chemistry. Organic chemistry chose me, because once I started reading about it, it just felt like it was almost like breathing, just reading about it, because it spoke to me in ways that other subjects could not. I know there's lots of physicists around the table. I was so bad at physics. I was amazingly bad. But chemistry and organic chemistry was just something that was really, it really got to me. And I think I tell lots of people, try and find that for yourself. And maybe sounds like some of you have already got there. And that's fantastic. So finding that part is so critical for driving yourself forward. It's the passion. It's the thing you do when you want to do it, as opposed to feeling like you should do it. That's the part which is critical.
Rebecca?
It's just something you said with trying out different parts and different subjects. I think, yes, that's very critical in the whole process of developing an interest or a fascination with something. But I also see a kind of a problem, especially when it comes to younger people, so even younger than us, children. Because how do you make science accessible to them? I think that's something we may need to work on. Really deciding on, offering children the opportunity to get into science at an early age. So to, figure fun ways to get to know certain topics. I think it goes a lot into exploring and discovering things on their own. Which I think could be a start to really light that scientific fire or passion.
Hector?
Yeah, so tying back to what Sir David was talking about, how you can basically lead your own research. And I think an important part about feeling engaged in science, in research overall, is just having leadership of your own question, right? So the way science is taught, at least in Mexico, you see it a lot in early education, where it's basically this entire process of learning factoids. And it's interesting, right? I mean, in biology, who doesn't know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell? But we should shift the conversation from what is a cell to how we can use cells to harness societal progress, right? So it's in this conversation, in this process of basically learning facts to applying these facts, to creating applied science, that I think we can harness a lot of excitement and a lot of progress in the field. It's just this entire process of not seeing yourself just as a bystander in the process, but as an actor of change, right? That you can use science, that you can use biology, any field you can use to your own intention. And it's just endless opportunities, endless manipulation, endless things we can create for good. And as long as you're, the author of your own question, as long as you have this relentless curiosity to keep asking, to keep researching, I think that's the clue, to basically continue solving problems, to solve societal problems with science.
And we have a last comment from Noelia before we move on.
I definitely support your argument, and I think we really need to convey this message to the rest of the youth in the world, that we shouldn't be scared of science, because when I was growing up, I thought that science was something that only people older than me could do. But as you grow up and with initiatives like this, you realize that, for instance, I'm sitting in a table with a lot of young people, young scientists that have done amazing projects. And I think that's also a message that we need to convey, that yes, young people can do science, and great science.
Thank you so much. So many valuable inputs. And I think what we'll hear is that education is really key to the future. And for everyone of you who is listening and watching, I think it's also key to remember that to become a Nobel laureate is not that you are born into a super smart genius. Sorry, you're a very smart genius, but you know that you find your passion, your interest, and that you really work hard on exploring, and that you almost get captured by that, so that you don't want to do anything else almost, because that becomes almost like your hobby. So, welcome to part 2 of the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Douagi, and I am the host of this roundtable discussion between young, brilliant minds in science and Professor Sir David Macmillan, a Nobel laureate in chemistry 2021. And this is taking place at the Nobel Prize Museum during the Nobel Week 2022. So, a tool that is central for communication between youth and spreading information on different topics is the internet. The internet has been central for organizing youth, like the climate demonstrations organized by Friday for Future. And in the report from UNICEF, 61% of young people reported using the internet for learning and information, but 75% reported facing barriers to accessing the internet. So, I would like to start with a first question on how important has access to the internet been for your studies and projects? I'm looking at maybe Hector.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, and specifically for today's generation. I mean, just talking about the internet and overall media connectivity, I've spent over the last year and a half connected to a computer, right? Taking classes due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And it's just another reminder of the importance of just media connectivity in today's society. If it wasn't for the internet, my education right now would be completely compromised, right? It'd be hard to continue advancing through, just your regular levels of high school. And outside of formal education, my entire research revolves around media connectivity. So it's just this entire process of having a connection between different assets of a community, between teachers, students, and many other aspects of day-to-day life that is really important. So it's not a matter of if the internet or just social media, technology in general is important to my work. My work revolves around internet connectivity, and I think that's something that we can say about a lot of fields in today's society.
So really central. Do you want to add something there, Rasmi?
Yeah, sure. Definitely piggyback of what Hector just said. The internet was such a big part of my life, and it has been. I use it every day. Even for my project, I feel like it's such a central component. Just to give a little bit of background, I've been working on assistive tech and helping kids. And one thing that I was doing on the project that got me here actually was building a therapy product for children with cortical visual impairment, or CVI. Essentially, that's a neurologically based vision disorder, which makes their vision kind of look like Swiss cheese, where they have little pockets of things that they can see. And it's super prevalent. So one thing I was working towards was building a web application for that revolutionizes state-of-the-art therapy techniques. Right now, therapy is really hard to access, especially in rural areas. With young kids, it can be really hard to get them places. And it also places a lot of emphasis on the parents and guardians right now. So I was working towards building a digitized version of that, adding on new features, implementing AI and machine learning techniques for that. And all those components come together using the internet. So they reach their end user using Wi-Fi and connections. And I feel like the internet has the ability to make such a difference. And I really saw that through this project.
Digital solutions are really, as you say, about accessibility. And we have seen that, like, as you said, about online classes, and actually for education, that was key for education and for many, both PhD students and high school students. Without the internet, there would have been no education at all during the pandemic, which is very crucial. And you can also see it like in healthcare, where you have these online physicians, where you actually go to your doctor by internet. But where do you see trends going in the future, and what is happening with the digital solutions in the future? I'm looking at you, Bertram. Maybe you would like to explore a little bit on this.
Yeah, I think personally for me, I'm obviously doing computer science within cybersecurity. So my concern isn't as much accessibility as it probably is for for some other people, because I'm sure they will be amazing at handling that problem and those challenges. When I see the current state of the internet, I get a little bit worried sometimes. Not because the internet itself is bad in nature, because it's not. It's amazing. It has become a central part of our democracy. You mentioned the Friday for Future activists who have been using it as a central tool to organize and protest. That obviously is going to upset the status quo and therefore make a lot of, unfortunately, rather powerful people rather, I was about to say uncomfortable. And therefore the internet is a place that is currently quite under a threat, not from necessarily cyber attacks or other people from the criminal world, but from our own governments and regulatory bodies who has shown to have an interest through the Snowden leaks, the Assange leaks, bills like the UNIDAC from the US and stuff like that, to try and lock down the internet, to try and keep the strong encryption that we know works to protect human rights and to protect our privacy, to try and lock that away from us and basically make math illegal. That is really unfortunate, and I think that is a fight that we have to fight over the coming decades, because we're gonna see more of that. We already see way too much of it, and we're gonna see more censorship, not just from China and from a lot of oppressive regimes, but also from the very democracies that we are part of, and we have to be able to tackle that.
Do you see that we will have not only one internet in the future, but several different versions, or there are already there?
That is a really interesting concept, actually, because it's something that has become increasingly relevant over the past few decades. Originally, the concept of the internet was this giant interconnected net of information, which obviously was global. But as we have seen people try to censor this and try to lock it down, what we have seen is countries like Iran and especially China and India and those try to have control over all the edge routers in the network, so they control all the information flowing in and out of the countries, and therefore not creating a central internet that is global, truly global, but creating their own communities within these countries to try and lock and spread lock down the spread of information, and that is problematic. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, especially in the oppressive regimes, but probably also in some democracies, and that is problematic also for science, because it obviously locks down sharing and exchanging information and studies.
It seems like we have many challenges in front of us, and many things regarding both internet and accessibility, security, and democracy. Many levels in this, not only concerning the STEM areas, but actually the society in whole. Would you like to add something into this discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I find in regard, even, coming from a country with excellent internet access, and I'm very lucky to go to a very good university where my research, I have a lot of journals that are open to me, a lot of ongoing subscriptions. But I understand that a lot of people that are researching, or students that are just trying to learn to begin with for research projects, literature reviews, anything like that, they don't always necessarily have access to these journals that can be hid behind a paywall, essentially. And it's the same with software and stuff like that as well. So I think what we really need to push for in this kind of next generation of scientists is pushing towards open source platforms, open source publishing. We have all this knowledge, but the knowledge is no good to us if we can't share it with everyone. Because right now there's more scientific publications coming out than ever before. There's more people doing science, which is terrific. There's more people than ever before doing science. But if you can't get access to that information and everyone can't be on the same page, then, it's really not all worth it. We need to push for open source, I find.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you about that, David, because that's a very important point about open access and scientific publications. As you all know, and the science is being made in labs, but it's very important to publish it in order to get the word out, to get other scientists to know about it, and also to get the world to know about it. So what would you say about open access and the availability and the amount of information there are out? How do you work with that?
That's a really very good point. Open source. In fact, I was founding editor of a journal in chemistry. It's called Chemical Science, which is now 100% open source, and it's available to everyone around the world. And that's, in my opinion, the way it should be. If you think, I mean, I'm old enough to remember what libraries really were back in the old days. You guys are too young. But libraries were places where you could be of any socioeconomic background and walk into a library, get a membership, and read anything you wanted to read, because that was the whole concept, was to spread knowledge for free. And you're exactly right. Whenever journals in any subject area then put these things behind a paywall, you're effectively amplifying a discrimination between the people who have resources and the people who do not. And there has to be a way forward for all information or ways of education that become accessible to more people. And beyond open source journals, I actually would argue that education, the way we educate people at universities, should become open source in a way that it actually impacts a lot more people than just the people who are privileged enough to be accepted in any given research, any given university college program. That has to become a broader concept as well. I think we're moving slowly towards that, but it's completely right. The publication world is one where open source has to become the norm and not the exception.
So, Hector, you want me?
Yeah, I think this ties back into just digital trends in general, right? I mean, we're raising the bar, increasing accessibility to research science overall. So at least in healthcare, the way I see it, we have internet connectivity. We have this communication technology that is essentially closing the gap, right? At least in healthcare in Mexico, we have an increasingly big surplus of patients that are overflowing the public healthcare system. And it's challenging. It's a problem to tackle for sure, right? Because we're lacking physicians, we're lacking the right amount of resources that we need to tackle these patients. I mean, it's in their human rights to have quality healthcare. So what can we do with the resources we have to basically augment their treatment, right? The project I'm working on, it's all about preventing drug resistance, among many other medical complications, through patient-physician communication. So I'm mentioning this because I think it ties into how we can take advantage of our resources to essentially augment this accessibility, right? To essentially see technology grow and to use this amazing resource that we have in the internet to essentially improve communities.
Yeah, that's very important. And also that leads into the last topic of this question, that also talking about medical information, and that then you come to secure data handling. So both, maybe Bertram is also into this topic, but there is so much information out on the internet that we need to really take care of and be aware of. And so we have both the secure data handling, but also then to enable a secure internet connection. I don't know. Yeah, ask me. Maybe you want to start.
Yeah, that's a critical piece of my project. I'm working with a lot of kids' medical data, physician data, and going off of what you said, seamlessly having those connections. I feel like telemedicine is becoming such a desirable option nowadays, that building a better system, that's what I'm trying to do. Building a better system of communication online is really important. But with that comes securing medical info. And before deploying my product, and as I'm working towards that, that's a really important question that I have to think about. It's still something I'm working on tackling. So I'd love to hear about potential things that we could do for that.
Do you want to comment anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is also an area where we already have the tools to solve the challenges. The tools have been known for the last 20 years. They are robust and battle-tested to such a degree that every time you go online, anywhere, your connection is nearly always made using what is called military-grade encryption. We already have the tools. We just have to have, just like with climate change, we have to have regulatory pressure to push firms and organizations to use these tools to properly secure user data. Unfortunately, we see large countries like the US moving in the opposite direction, making it harder for private companies to properly secure data because they have an interest in that being open. But we have to use these tools because they are available and they're efficient.
How do you think this pressure can be made? Like, can the youth be important here?
I think I think so. I don't think it's never gonna be as big as the climate debate, but I think it bears many similarities. It should be. I don't like to call it a human right, because I think that is the bare minimum of what we need to survive. But I think it should be something we should be actively seeking. It's something that when they take away rights from us, the right to properly secure our own data, we should go out and, in the best case, protest in the same way that we see Fridays for Futures do it.
Yeah. David, do secure data handling, is that something you think about when you have scientific information or discussions, or is that a concern in your?
In my world, quite frankly, no. I mean, I would love to think that our information was so important that people were constantly trying to get it, but I don't think they really are. But at the same time, listening to these sort of comments around the table, I mean, it's clear that there are these basically ways that are potentially in place to think about this problem, especially with understanding and thinking about your medical information, and the fact that there are countries and larger components which are not taking that on board. I fully agree. One of the things that I'll tell you, and I don't know, I'm sure you hear this from other people, but one of the things that I love most right now, being at my age, is watching so many younger people be activists about things they care about. And I feel a much stronger sort of sense of purpose and determination around many issues, maybe because they're so important, than necessarily I would have even found in my own generation, for sure. And I really think it is important to maintain that, to keep that sense of we're going to do what's best for our world. And because your world is your world, and then you will hand it off to the next world too. And I think you all understand that. And I really do believe that that sense of determination and purpose is important. So yeah, definitely retain that.
Thank you so much. And I think especially for your generation and for you who are watching, the digital world we are living in is really a part of I would not say your DNA, because that sounds a little bit scary, but it's a world you have been living in all of your lives, and that is something the baton you have to run and take forward to make as you say, the best world we want to live in. So the internet access, the internet availability is a core for all topics I hear from you, all dimensions in society, both in science, in life, and also it's important for the future of democracy that we are handling this in the right way. So I think we came with many important discussions during this topic, and also the right to data and open access of scientific information. So welcome to part 3 of the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Doagy, and I am the host of this roundtable discussion between brilliant young minds in science and Professor Sir David Macmillan, Nobel laureate in chemistry 2021. And this is taking place at the Nobel Museum during the Nobel Week 2022 in Stockholm. The focus of solving the climate crisis has often been on the individual level. On the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's webpage, it is possible to calculate your own carbon footprint, and the New York Times has published guides on how to reduce your carbon emissions. Yet, in 2020, when the whole world was moved more or less into lockdown, the international passenger traffic dropped 60%, but the effect on carbon dioxide emissions only dropped 8% compared to 2019 levels. The U Report, UNICEF's platform to bring in and engage young voices from all over the world, states that 88% of the youth feel responsible for the climate crisis, and 71% states that they want to have an active role in green transition. So going forward, is it reasonable to put as big focus on an individual efforts, or should more responsibility be put on companies and policymakers? What do you say, Ishan?
So I think it's really encouraging that so many young people feel responsible and want to take action. And I hope that that figure of 71% continues to go up as we get better at climate outreach and educating the public about the climate crisis. That being said, I think the onus of responsibility has to shift towards policymakers and companies, and specifically policies targeted at companies and providing sustainable infrastructure for the public. There's a couple reasons for that. First of all is that if just individuals make changes, that's great, and that can have a great impact, but the amount of carbon emissions that come from industry won't be affected, or greenhouse gas emissions from the industrial sector, from companies, from all these big for-profit organizations won't be touched by the individual changes we make at home so much. The other thing is that for individuals, oftentimes our choices and what we're able to do to limit our own greenhouse gas emissions is limited by what's available to us, by what our power grid looks like, by what the products on the shelves look like, what's available to us, and what sort of changes we're able to make, and focusing on policy to shift what's available to us by providing access to sustainable infrastructure and access to renewable energy allows individuals to make more of a change on their lives and their impact as well.
Thank you. Nelia, do you want to comment on that or further explore?
To add in support your message, I absolutely agree. And I think that the decisions that we make should be connected, but also collective. And of course, us as individuals have to step up and do something about it. But we should think about what companies are doing. For instance, if we think about small companies, of course, a priority might not be the environmental and sustainability plans, but we should try to make these plans a priority in the pipeline of companies in order to assure that we actually improve in this. And for instance, if we think about the context of solar panels, should we, like it's been discussed recently, like should we put up these solar panels like in our households as individuals? Should we do this like to supply energy for an entire city? What should we do? I think if we should do this at a city level, because if we did it on individuals' household, the problem would be who would have access to these solar panels. Perhaps would we cause some segregation in cities. Some people with better economic background would have access to solar panels and some others would. I think we need to think about this too. And also think that decision making of individuals would also have a role in this issue. So perhaps if we look at the more efficient solution here, we should look at an entire city instead of individuals, and in this case also policymakers.
Thank you. Hassan?
Yeah, I would just like to add, like, really, engaging conversation from Eshan, the point he presented, which goes on about talking about what the options we have, on the shelves or the energy mix we are provided. Like, we don't really have a choice as individuals on these bigger, larger scheme of things. And the statistic you mentioned, which is, there was a drop in 60% of the mobility of traffic, but then the carbon emissions just dropped by 8%. So we need to take a step back and look at what are the largest emitters. It is the cement and the steel industry, which constitutes of our construction. And the second one is the agriculture. So, these two are our biggest, carbon emitters. And we have to kind of step back and try to focus more on these industries other than, the focus usually being on energy mixes, but not on the construction industry. So we need to kind of look into that as well.
Thank you. Bertram?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. I absolutely echo what everyone said here, but I don't necessarily believe we have a climate crisis. And that is not because I don't think it's a potential catastrophe waiting to happen. It's because I think the root cause here is not climate. It's a problem with how we handle democracy. Of course, we have to tackle climate change, but what we're really seeing here is that we as a people are unable to convert our personal opinions about climate change because it is a pressing issue and it is an issue that should be solved yesterday. We're unable to convert that into action in the societies that we live in because democracy is, I don't like to call it flawed because we don't have anything better, but it is a weak system and we have to improve at being a democratic country if we want to tackle pressing issues like climate change. I think that should be the main focus, educating people on how they can make a difference in climate change by by being passionate about the policymakers who are in charge, because I think that is where the burden of solving climate change should be put.
It's interesting how education always comes in all topics, how important that is for policymakers and also for citizens to be educated, to make educated choices. Rebecca?
Yes, and in addition to this, these educated choices, there's also the point of accessibility that came up a lot of times already in this discussion, which I would just like to highlight, because at least where I come from in Switzerland, oftentimes sustainable products are a luxury good. So as a student, I will not be able to, do a lot of sustainable shopping or like go to unpackaged stores or anything. So although I certainly agree with Bertram on the point of that, it's important that we know what is at risk, that we know how we can maybe push politicians into a direction of making very unsustainable companies more accountable for their actions, or like have funds supporting a more sustainable way of having agriculture, and even all this factories that produce goods that we need to build, houses or something. It's just really important too that the accessibility and is just always kept in sight, so that it's not a luxury good, because it certainly shouldn't be just for the ones who can spend the money on it. It should be accessible for everybody.
That's a very important point, also accessibility of sustainable solutions. So Benjamin?
Yeah, I'd like to add to the accessibility and accountability point that was made there. So we have recently seen the increase in accountability from these companies, or the illusion of it, with kind of the greenwashing effect that we see, where we have these companies advertising, their sustainability and how they're managing their quotas and everything. And we do, as a society, need to be careful of this. These luxury goods that we are buying, they are said that they are sustainable, they're said they're from green sources, but are they actually? We need a transparency of these companies and how these policies are being met and how the quotas are being met. And as rather than on an individual level focus on what we should do, we should gather together and put more pressure on the policymakers, that when these policies do change, that we have a transparent view on how they are done.
Yeah, and going off of what you were just saying about companies putting forth these things about what they're doing on the inside, I also feel like they make really lofty goals. Things like, we're going to be carbon neutral by X, or I've seen companies that were saying, oh, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2020 or 2030, and that's most definitely not going to be the case. And setting boundaries and getting smaller steps will help those things to be more actionable, and will pull more of the focus onto them, and instead of pushing it onto all the citizens.
Thank you, Vision.
I just wanted to go off that point again, like you brought up greenwashing, and back to the root question of should the responsibility be on the individual or the policymakers. If we go with the strategy of pushing the responsibility to individuals, then we're actually incentivizing companies to do more greenwashing. If we're looking to do sustainable shopping, then all these companies are going to want to express how quickly they can be carbon neutral and how green their products are, when in reality there might not be systems for oversight. So I think policy is the best way we can go forward with that. And a good example of this is the Montreal Protocol, which now has been, standing for several decades. But it's one of the best examples we have of global policy making, not even just in terms of sustainability and atmospheric protection, but overall. But it's a global policy-driven effort to reduce CFCs, to prevent the destruction of the ozone layer. And its success came from policy that targets companies that produce CFCs and emit CFCs, rather than going after individual consumers or shoppers and telling them what products to buy and what not to buy. So I think we should emulate that with our push towards climate sustainability.
So clearly a complex question, and that's, we realize, because policymakers are not really solving it rapidly. So the U report, again, this report where youth voices are collected, states that 47% of young people cite a lack of capital and resources for environmental friendly ideas as the biggest challenge to supporting the transition to a green economy. What do you say about that, Nelia?
I think that funding is definitely behind this, and it plays a key role in how we make efforts towards having more sustainable products and how we push towards having more ideas materializing that can achieve these solutions. And also, I absolutely believe that innovation and science have to be funded. Like, all of us have carried out projects here, and all of us have had funding behind us. Otherwise, those projects wouldn't have made it. So I really want to highlight that we need funding towards innovation and science. And in the context of sustainability, there are a lot of grants that aim at funding projects that want to pursue sustainability plans. So I think we should really encourage our governments and organizations to promote these grants and to fund science.
David, your discovery actually made chemistry greener, or could potentially make it greener by using maybe less metals as catalysts. Did you experience this as a basis when you applied for funding, or was it something that you saw that now is opening a new window where you can get funding into more green research, sort of?
I'd say that when we first started to do it, it was purely from the point of view that we felt that it could have an impact on humans. And we saw about it would have an impact in a lot of different aspects. Sustainability, to be honest, came as later, that we started to realize it had a range of advantages, but it was also sustainable. It was part of the carbon life cycle. And all of that was important. One thing I just wanted to add, and I love this conversation actually, and really around the idea of that we have to sort of push towards larger organizations and also policy as well. But if you actually look at the climate issue, and well, climate science is not my world. I have to go to a lot of climate discussions because of my situation at the present time. And talking to a lot of great climate scientists, one of the things which is really, I find fascinating, is the idea that obviously we have renewable energy, and we need to have more renewable energy, but we also have to get carbon out of the atmosphere. And if we don't do that with a certain rate or within a certain time frame, there's really reasonable chance we're hitting a tipping point where we will, even if we become renewable, it won't necessarily help us. So getting carbon out of the atmosphere is extraordinarily important. One of the parts that came up, which I think is such a great part of this, is companies talking about being carbon neutral. There has to be, whether we like it or not, and it's reality, there has to be financial drivers that will drive climate science forward. If we don't have financial drivers, it will be morally correct, but it won't actually necessarily happen in the time frame that we want it is. The carbon neutral part, though, in trying to get carbon out of the atmosphere, one of the things which I think will come back to policy is enforcement of the carbon neutral component for companies. And I'll give you an example. There is a movement now towards trying to get CO2 out of the atmosphere via mineralization. That in and of itself does not sound like you could necessarily make money. No company could necessarily make money from it. However, if governments and policymakers enforce the companies to be carbon neutral and they can pay for that as an offsetting carbon, almost basically as a carbon tax, that in and of itself will provide financial drivers to allow us to start to scrub carbon out of the atmosphere. But we have to put a lot more focus, a lot more energy, a lot more resources into it. And I'll say really quickly, it's funny, you can sort of talk about health and whether we have good healthcare or not good healthcare, but governments do fund health research around the world because it's an idea that's not so abstract. We all have parents, we all have sisters and brothers, we have children, and we care about their health. So we drive forward to care about their health. Because climate change at times can sound like an abstract concept, especially to, I would say, older people who did not grow up with it. We have to keep pushing the fact that this is not an abstract concept. This is something that's real and it's happening now. And we have to get behind it the same way for policymakers and for resources for funding to go towards it in the same way that we've done about health in the past.
So then we have again the question on how to achieve this and how to move forward, and also to put pressure on these funding incentives to push for more green and sustainable research in different areas actually. So is there someone who wants to add a final word also to our viewers? What do you think would be an important thing for youth today to think about when when thinking about maybe choosing a career way forward or something that you could do on your own? Hector, do you want to add something?
Sure. Entering into this conversation, we were talking about individuals versus companies, industries, and I think we can approach this with a multifaceted approach, right? I mean, we're not only talking about individual actions as in, oh, what are you using on a daily basis, your sustainable shopping, or industries as in a manufacture, production, etc. Moving back to this greenwashing, right, to how companies and brands essentially promise that they're going to go carbon neutral or etc. I mean, what happens is that the gain they obtain by announcing these promises is much bigger than the downfall they have from not complying with these promises, right? I mean, if we look at it in an objective basis, but we the people have the power to raise that second bar, right? I mean, to make this entire matter much more important and urgent problem, right? I mean, we as a society have the potential to make them accountable, right? I mean, we can use our voice, we can use our democracy to essentially pressure them into realizing that this is the will of the people, right? I mean, that we as a collective need, and we need to strive for a community that's green, right? No more fake promises, no more greenwashing, but actually doing some washing of this planet Earth.
Yeah, good point. Anyone want a final word in this, or your? Yes.
So, of course, the topic of our discussion focuses around science, and I think science innovation around sustainability is going to be a really important driving factor to enable a sustainable future for the planet. For anyone at home watching as well, this is not just something that you have to be involved in science with to make a difference. Like, we're talking about this multifaceted approach to solving the climate crisis. We'll also need policymakers and business people who are able to adapt to new sustainable markets, to open up businesses that focus on those as well, and journalists and protesters and a whole world outside of science that has to collaborate to enable a sustainable future. So I think that's really important as well, and I'm hoping that this conversation can help inspire people outside of science as well as within.
Thank you. So this question and this topic complex, but we need actually everyone to step up, both individuals, companies, policymakers, journalists, teachers, scientists, all of us actually. So thank you so much for sharing all your thoughts and contributions and making a better and brighter future also through science, but also all of us actually. So welcome to part 4 of the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Doagi, and I'm the host of this roundtable discussion between brilliant young minds and Professor Sir David Macmillan, Nobel laureate in chemistry 2021. And this is taking place at the Nobel Prize Museum in Stockholm during the Nobel Week 2022. A central consequence of the climate crisis is the decrease in biodiversity. In 2019, it was reported that 1 million species face extinction, many of them within decades only. The speed at which extinction takes place today is already at least tens or hundreds of times higher than it has averaged over the past 10 million years. Oh, heavy numbers. With regards to this issue, the IPBES chair, Sir Robert Watson, stated that the health of ecosystems on which we all and other species depend on is deteriorating more rapidly than ever. We are eroding the very foundations of our economies, livelihoods, food security, health, and quality of life worldwide. Oof. This is really important topics. We should try to spread some light on this. My question to you in this panel is, how do you think STEM research can help to decrease the rate of which biodiversity is declining? So I'm turning to Jordan.
Yes, so I think STEM is really the key to decreasing the rates that we see biodiversity loss. Not only that, but advancements in technology. So with advancements in technology, when we go to look for specific reasons why certain species may be threatened, you can't always just assume that it's the same thing for every species that's under threat. So with new technological advancements like drones and satellites, we're able to, say for migratory species, we can actually monitor them in a non-invasive way, where in the past we weren't always able to do that sort of thing. But I mean, I'm an Aussie, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. And whenever I think of, a lot of disruption to natural ecosystems, I think of the Great Barrier Reef. So, with the climate crisis that we have and the warming of our ocean waters, we face these mass coral bleaching events, which just disrupt an entire ecosystem. The reef systems, they're home to 25% of all marine life. So when we lose those marine ecosystems, there's just mass loss of life, or life that's just displaced in our oceans. So I think what STEM can do for us in Australia, but also a worldwide effort, shows a good example of is certain pathways. So they call them, for coral, there's assisted gene flow, which is where they take a coral from like a warmer water species and they mix breed it with a colder water species. And they embed them into a threatened reef that's currently colder water, but as that water starts to increase, it inherits that warm water property of one of the parents. So it creates a more robust reef system that can ultimately, if the water keeps getting warmer and warmer, we're only buying more time, but it buys more time to begin with anyway, so we can really address the climate crisis. So I think STEM and technological advancements, without them going hand in hand, we won't be able to address the rate that biodiversity is lost.
Meda, do you agree with this, or do you have some other thoughts?
When we talk about various animals, bacteria, each of these species and organisms are working in an ecosystem which is balanced. And that balance is a support of our life, like life that was before humans, right? And it's important to understand that if something goes extinct, people cannot create it, or people cannot recreate it. People only can create a new one. So with this in mind, we should try to not forget, and with STEM research, really see the value of what we have and the problems that it addresses. And STEM research always provides some sort of a way, or some sort of a direction to which we could follow for the better, and that gives us future solution for today's problems. And with STEM research works, we give a lot of knowledge. We get knowledge for today, and their scientist who does this research gives us hope for tomorrow.
Well, that's lovely. So balance in the ecosystem is really an important topic when you talk about extinction and loss of biodiversity, of course. Asmi, do you want to further develop the discussion?
Yeah. At a broad level, of course, we can use things, concepts like AI, statistical modeling, and remote sensing to mitigate a lot of these problems. One thing in particular is satellite imagery. I've looked at that before to more accurately map poverty across the globe, but we can also apply that to a lot of different scenarios. And one of them is providing greater information on exactly where, and pinpointing exactly where species are at the greatest risk of extinction, and using ML on crowdsourced environmental data is also another option. Solar-powered devices to map ecosystems long term, and I think, Jordan, you mentioned some drone-based systems for warning signs of poaching or unwanted human presence, things like that. One thing that's sometimes overlooked is emotions. A lot of the times, I think well-timed or well-placed pictures are enough to stir up feelings in humans of, oh, we should make a change for this purpose. And I've seen a lot of really impactful images. There's just elusive animals in the wild that we wouldn't have captured otherwise if this long-term camera hadn't been in place. And then one other thing is climate change not only affects animals, there's also plants involved. And that creates food insecurity, I think creating some type of models to better track this and create something to assess financial losses for insurance companies and for farmers alike would be a good strategy in the agriculture sector.
So you see many of the new technologies that are applicable to address the topic of loss of biodiversity.
Yeah.
What do you say, Benjamin?
Yeah, some great points there. I think you guys have covered how we've improved technology recently and how it's been applied to the ecosystem and everything. And there's some pretty damning stats that you read out at the start there, and it's kind of, I don't know, I've kind of become used to hearing, oh, we've lost this species, we've lost, another one, and we're kind of numb to it, I think, at the moment. But it's not all negative. There are some fantastic success stories of how biodiversity and how the earth can recover really well. It's a great healer. There's a really good example. In the past decade, there was a guy called Alan Savoy. I'd recommend going on YouTube and having a look at this. But he reinstated the status quo in the large savannas in Africa, where he introduced mass herding back into the society. Into the ecosystem, and the change was rapid. It was a barren landscape, and he introduced mass herding back in, and the biodiversity increased within years. And then it'd been ruined for decades, and within a few years we see these great changes. And I think that we should have some more positive affirmation towards what we can do when we enact these changes. And as long as we act assertively rather than aggressively, trying not to create polarization with anyone, then we can use these success stories to inspire people to create more.
Yeah, that's a very important point. I think also the importance that you mentioned about images, that we actually see what is going on, and then also to create the engagement and emotions to do something. But then also to share the success stories, and that things are not only getting darker, but some things are also getting better, and we are finding solutions. David, do you think emerging technologies, or do you see something in chemistry or in your field that you would say would be applicable to this topic?
It's a very interesting one, and again, it's not a topic that is my main area. But however, I think the part that as humans we can all understand that this reduction, these dramatic numbers that you talk about, this is a sort of canary in the coal mine situation where it's telling us what's happening to our planet in real time. Even if it's ahead of what potentially could happen to humans, it's telling us about what's happening to the planet. So it's a warning. But what you heard there was also two different stories about how you can start to think about innovation for the future. And one of the things that it always comes back to is every time we face problems as a race, it also provides opportunities. It provides opportunities for us to step up and think about how we can start to innovate and think differently or change what we're doing. And I think one of the sort of real moments that we have to think about right now, especially for young people or people in high school, is what can they do? What can they think about? What research paths, what science can they think about? We can start to have some kind of impact or think about this in a different way, whether it's climate change directly, biodiversity directly. But these are moments where it provides opportunities to think about how we can change it and fix it and move towards in a positive direction.
So we know that this is a question that many young people around the world are concerned about. So does any one of you here have some for the viewers, that if you want to engage within STEM research and you want to address this topic, how do you find where to put your engagement, or which topics to select to work on, or what to study if you want to go into STEM, or you want to?
May I add? When you talked about great stories like the ones that succeeded, I remember that in my home country we suffer from deforestation, and forests are not only the wood, but it's also the home, the place where all the animals and species, bacteria, organisms live. And there was this year a great success. I would say that one of the STEM researcher, she did look into the woods and found the mushroom that is like an indicator. It shows that this forest has the great flora for all the upcoming organisms that could live there. And with this research, they bought out the forest, and they are like put it in the safe zone so that it wouldn't be destroyed. And with the research, we like caught up with the extinction, and we can prevent it.
That's a great story. Jordan.
I think when a young scientist is trying to address what they want to research or what they want to look towards, if you're thinking about biodiversity loss and relating it to climate change, I think you should think back to some of the grassroots of where climate change is, being driven from. So ultimately, chemical pollution is kind of pushing climate change, but chemical pollution is more than just a carbon dioxide, methane beast. It's, there's many classes of chemical pollutants, and I'd recommend reading a book called A Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, and she talks about DDT, so a pesticide that decimated bird populations. And I think you might find that biodiversity loss isn't just coming from climate change itself. It's all kind of spawning from chemical pollution and this misuse or malpractice in regards to our handling of chemicals, and sometimes the production of chemicals that we don't understand before we start using them. So there's so many chemicals used on the global market where only a fraction of them are either characterized for, in public domain, or if they are characterized, a lot of the time they're hidden as industry secrets and stuff like that. But a lot of these chemicals can affect biodiversity as well. And I think pesticides are the perfect example. We engineer them to control and destroy life. So who's to say it's not going to affect a much larger ecosystem than what we're trying to target?
I think that's a beautiful also link to, because at least in Sweden we see that there are not so many young people who choose chemistry. Actually, in the university, they have almost problems to get people to go into chemistry studies. Maybe then, as you said, then point out that chemistry is really linked to climate change and the loss of biodiversity. So if you are a young person engaged in this, maybe chemistry is a field that you do you have a word for the viewers?
Yeah, very strong words. And actually, Jordan's points are really, really good. I think one of the parts which is really most difficult being involved with chemistry is the public relations around the word chemistry. I'll give you examples. So, for example, we think of chemistry, often society thinks of chemicals, we think of smokestacks, we think of nasty molecules which are impacting biodiversity, right? Because of ways that things in which chemistry is used. But the problem is that we forget that chemistry underlies everything, absolutely everything. So all the beneficial things that are happening around us happen because of chemistry. One of my favorite parts to tell people is when they take a medicine, they always think a doctor or a medic invented that medicine. They didn't. It was a chemist. So chemists impact our world in so many positive ways. And as chemists, we're terrible at publicizing all the good ways. But we know that all the negative ways will come out as they should come out, and things like that in terms of these sort of nasty sort of chemicals. And the word chemical itself is viewed as you hear the word chemical, you don't like it. You don't think, oh, chemical, I'd love some chemical. So what we have to do, it's interesting in America and in other places, we've started to actually just use different words. And you might think, is that fair? But we talk about, for example, catalysis. And catalysis changes our world in so many positive ways, but the society doesn't actually have a negative response to it. And it's a kind of shame that we have to do that, but I think we almost have to do that because there is such a negative connotation just around chemistry, even though it is an unbelievably important. And climate sciences and biodiversity and in healthcare and materials, all these things as they're solved, and I'm very optimistic, I believe they will be solved, they're going to be solved because of chemistry. And it really is true, and we can't avoid that. And they're also going to be solved because of catalysis. but able to get society behind us, we might have to call it catalysis instead of chemistry. But it is inordinately important that we don't walk away from an area that is so important to the human race.
That's fantastic words, I must say. And you're, of course, not objective regarding the chemistry as a solution to the world's problem.
Yeah.
But for you who is looking at this, I think really see chemistry as a way to really go into a variety of questions, and you can also come into solving climate crisis and loss of biodiversity. So I think that was wonderful final words in this topic. So, a warm welcome to part 5 of the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Doagi, and I am the host of this roundtable discussion between brilliant young minds in science and Professor Sir David Macmillan, Nobel laureate in chemistry 2021. And this is taking place at the Nobel Prize Museum in Stockholm during the Nobel Week of 2022. And this question is has been produced together with the Luleå University of Technology. A large part of the Earth's arable land disappears in connection with climate change. At the same time, better conditions arise for cultivation in other places around the Earth. So how can we influence this change so that it leads to more sustainable and environmental improvements as well as better cultivation techniques? So maybe Xiaoqing, I'll start with you.
Right, so I think definitely we see one of the impacts of climate change that already is happening now is how it makes the weather very unpredictable. So in terms of like droughts, like Australia bushfires, right, or like heat waves in Europe. So we already see that happening, and I feel like one way to ensure like our food security through all of this, because all these changes definitely affect our crops and stuff. So one way to ensure food security would be to find technological solutions so that we can cultivate crops without relying on kind of the weather or like soil. So for example, technologies like hydroponics, so where we use water and probably chemistry to grow the plants without the need for without it being vulnerable to outside changes or vertical farms and so on. So especially in Singapore, because we have very little arable land because we're so tiny, but we do aim to have 30% of our nutritional needs met by locally grown food. So we do turn to a lot of these technological solutions, having hydroponics, aeroponics, or using vertical, I think rooftop farms or this kind of stuff, so that we don't need to rely so much on arable land outside, but rather we can bring farming and cultivation indoors too, that we can better control it and we're not so vulnerable to the changes that are brought about by climate change.
That sounds like a really smart idea to have this, not because that's what we see all the time now, where we have all the things going on in the world with the climate and weather. So Hassan, I'm thinking, do you want to explore a little bit on this?
Yeah. So great point, Xiaoqing. So I'm going to expand a bit, give a pre-context on where we stand at this moment as one nation, if we consider all of us on this planet. So you mentioned about, unpredictable weather because of climate change. I think one thing we need to focus on is how our land use policies are really, really bad, because this is something which is driving climate change as well. So if we look at, rising temperatures, we are looking, and if we look at the Northern Hemisphere, for example, we are in Sweden right now, which is the boreal region. If people know about the different environments, ecosystems around the world, boreal is one of them, which is basically between 50 and 60 latitudes. So areas like Sweden or UK or the northern parts of Canada are getting more and more, suitable to agriculture, for example. And there's this, big conversation going on that, okay, are we going to shift, our agricultural, techniques or policies where we're going to, produce more and more crops for a commercial, farming in these areas. But then lots of it depends on the hope that this is going to work. But we do not know if it's actually going to work. And these terrestrial ecosystems are also our carbon sinks. And if we are going to change these ecosystem like the boreal, which consists of many evergreen coniferous trees and all that, carbon sinks, we might be going from a climate crisis into an environmental crisis, and we do not want that. We want something which is more sustainable. We want to make sure that if we are to continue to farm sustainably, we have to figure out how our current farming techniques are, which are not sustainable. This is not working. We need to kind of look into how we can, not drive the same techniques in the future and work for better farming techniques.
So better farming techniques and not reliable on weather. So Noelia, do you have something other things that you are thinking about?
I would also like to bring up the topic of hydroponics. Right now, we are facing a crisis that, of course, will affect the use that we currently have of the soil. And this use would decrease the use of land by 90 to 99%, which is quite remarkable. But also, I think that agriculture, besides contributing to this climate crisis, is also affected by it. So we should also acknowledge this. And for instance, we might want to look at the use we do of fertilizers. They are currently used, but they also release greenhouse gas to the atmosphere. So perhaps we would like to change this so that we have a more sustainable use, but we also can profit from it. And for instance, there's been discussions about whether we should decrease the temperature these fertilizers require for their making, because really high temperatures are needed. So a lot of research is right now done on how we can decrease this temperature. But of course, coming back to the topic that has already been brought up in this discussion, we need funding for STEM solutions, because we are discussing a lot of ideas here, hydroponics, which requires a lot of economic efforts to be implemented. Also, we are talking about improving the use of fertilizers, but of course, we can only materialize these ideas if we have funding behind.
That's true. David, for fertilizers, fresh water, food production, do you see anything in your field within chemistry or organocatalysis? Is that something that can be used?
Yeah, so the fertilizer one is one which is pretty remarkable. Actually, the statistics behind that are based upon one catalytic reaction, and it's called nitrogen fixation, which takes nitrogen and makes any ammonia. And as it turns out, you couldn't have 8 billion people on Earth right now without this one catalytic reaction. Really remarkable. However, and to your point, which is exactly right, that one catalytic reaction uses up 1% of the world's energy supply every single day. That's an enormous amount of energy. It actually creates more than 1% of the world's CO2 production on a daily basis. So it's inordinately important for humans to have this one catalytic reaction, but it's also creating issues associated with it, obviously. But as the word suggests, and this you'll sound like I'm being a chemist and being biased, but catalysis is the way to solve this, because the catalytic process that we have right now requires this amount of heat. It requires this amount of energy. What we need is better catalysis. So there are reasonably large numbers of people working on this problem, but this is the same question we keep coming back to. You need more people, more resources, more people involved with thinking about that problem. How do you change the catalysis so that you can still achieve the production of these molecules that we need, but without actually creating so much energy burden, without creating so much carbon dioxide?
There are many things that needs to be worked on. As in all questions we have discussed today, there are so many layers and so many challenges, and many has to come together to work on this. Do you think, Hassan, is it something that we did not mention, or are there some areas or techniques or other things that we should also think about, and also for our viewers, if there is something that they should think about going into the future?
So just before coming here, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine in Cambridge about how can we make farming more sustainable. And one of the things, because she works on this, that's her PhD is based on this. And through this conversation, we were basically trying to figure out how can we manage land more sustainably, right? So she was mentioning about the use of containers, which is happening, that you can kind of use a container where you do farm and you can produce as much yield as 1 acre of farming land. So it's about, using land sustainably. And like David, Professor David has mentioned, that the use of fertilizers, right? It's something which is carbon intensive, and it does add to carbon emissions, right? So this is something which we need to kind of, again, have a conversation about when we are going to move into, when we have these conversations about food security, for example, or when we are going to consider that, okay, if there are permafrost regions which are thawing, we need to also have these conversations that the greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane are getting released because there are bacteria which are decomposing the plant and animal material which was previously under the permafrost. So there are so many conversations that how do we these regions will be prone to more carbon emissions, or if we are going to do farming, we're going to also contribute to carbon emissions because we're going to be losing our carbon sinks. So there's lots to talk about.
Is anyone else of you wanting to add something from your perspective when it comes to food production or fresh water or for the future of the sustainable food in general? Yes, Sigrid.
Actually, I was thinking about because we have so many, the population is ever increasing, right? So I was thinking about untapped sources of food, like food production. And one thing that I came across in my research was insects as food, which I thought was really interesting because I have a friend who did a research project about, I think, using insects to make some sort of pastry. Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because I think insects require much less resources to grow, not really grow, but yeah, because they take 12 times less feed than cattle for the same amount of protein, and they are also much more environmentally friendly. They don't release as much CO2 or methane as traditional livestock. So I was thinking in the future, obviously there's some issues with insects being accepted widely as a source of food because we kind of find it icky, but it really is an untapped kind of potential area. So for example, I know at least in Singapore there's some startup that uses black soldier fly larvae to break down food waste and turn it into animal feed and other biomaterials. So, or just using insects and making protein from that. I was wondering why do we not really do that yet? Because we don't think about how sausages are made, even though it is kind of disgusting. So why not we just take insects and use them as food, because they really are much less resource intensive to produce and have less of an impact on the environment. Yeah,
it's interesting. You mentioned in many of the discussions today, you talk about solutions that seem to already exist, but that we are not, by some reason, not using on different topics we have discussed today. And I guess there are many concerns, and they can be both ethical and societal-wise not something that seems to be acceptable, or other things that makes these things not. Everything from cybersecurity to eating insects or fertilizers. I mean, there are many levels where it feels like there are a lot of solutions out there, but that we are not using. So that is also something to take home from, and also to you who are watching, that there are many things that actually we can do. I don't know. Did you want to add something, Nelly?
Yes, I think that if we are discussing this context, we should also address fresh water, because that's also one of the concerns regarding the climate crisis. And I think that what we should do is also make the most of the water that we have. So recycling water has been discussed for a while now. Microbiology offers a lot of potential in this field. We can come up with ways to treat water using microbes so that we can reuse this water that otherwise would be discarded. So I think, as you just mentioned, we have a lot of ideas and a lot of tools, but we really need to see them materialize.
We need to start reusing them. Hector?
I think in discussing solutions, we need to consider many approaches and just all the consequences that stem from what we're doing, right? Whenever we address, say, bacterial infections among agriculture, cattle production, sure, we can use antibiotics as a means to prevent this incidence of infections. But then we look at the people and then we see a spread of bacterial resistance, right? So we have one solution that is not essentially a cure-all solution, despite antibiotics being involved. And it just goes to show, I mean, the importance of considering different approaches and the sustainable solutions, because these sustainable solutions, to be truly sustainable, I mean, they have to work and they need to be efficient in multiple aspects, right? If something's working in agriculture, but it's not working in healthcare, then it's not working in neither aspect of life.
David, I think that, I mean, for you and I, who are not as young as fresh as the group here and our viewers.
For me, that's
Yeah. I feel quite happy and optimistic to hear all these, input and good suggestions and focusing on solutions rather than problems. Do you want to just conclude this topic by some reflections on this?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important in science is also the sociology of how people respond to science. And one thing I mentioned earlier today, which I absolutely believe is true, I'm interested in as an academic, I'm constantly getting older, but my group always stays the same age, right? They always stay between 18 and 25. So I get to work with people and I can see, honestly, right now, there is a purpose and there is a drive and activism, if you want to see it, to sort of think about how do we go about solving these problems. You can feel it, it's real. And I think one of the things that I take great optimism from is an understanding that human beings, when faced with adversity, can really address adversity, but it requires people who actually care. And one of the things that I see amongst people, not just around this table, but in general amongst younger people, is this desire to actually leave the world in a better place than what they actually found it in.
That's fantastic. That's something that we can end this topic with. Welcome to part 6 of the Minds of the Future. My name is Anna Sjöström Douagi, and I am the host of this roundtable discussion between young minds in science and Professor Sir David Macmillan, Nobel laureate in chemistry 2021. This is taking place at the Nobel Prize Museum in Stockholm during the Nobel Week of 2022. And this question has been worked together with Umeå University. And we talk about going into the future. It is important to ensure safe and sustainable living. Infrastructure construction is one of the main emitters of greenhouse gases, accounting for approximately 1/3 of total emissions globally. A material that is central for cleaner construction is timber. Forests have a huge capacity to sequester carbon dioxide, and photosynthesis is one of the few processes that can counteract carbon dioxide emissions and also remove it from the atmosphere. Using wood as a construction material can be a design strategy that can reduce the carbon dioxide emissions substantially. Some studies even suggesting the reductions in global warming potential of 60%. So although timber has a great potential for reducing CO2 emissions, it is not a flawless material. Harvesting wood unsuitably degrades soil and important land sinks, and it can also cause reduction in biodiversity. So, how do we make sure to both care for the natural benefits of forests while still enabling the usage of timber in sustainable constructions? Do you want to start, Hassan?
Sure. Thanks. I think that's a question or a conversation which we all should be having at this moment. And going back to the statistics you mentioned, which is 33% of our carbon emissions are coming from the building and the construction industry, which constitutes of carbon intensive materials such as steel industry and cement industry. So if we look at how the urban sprawling is going on, it is expected that by 2050 around 80%, 70 to 80% of the population would live in urban cities. And to keep up with that, we would need cities which are sustainable, which are which can fit in that much population. Second, they can also they're not carbon intensive. The new buildings are not carbon intensive. And the conversation comes in, how do we make our cities more carbon neutral or carbon zero? So timber, as you mentioned, is one of the materials which is not something which hasn't been used historically. It's something which has been used specifically in European countries, in Canada, Northern America, and it's something which can be kind of retrofitted into our current buildings. But how do we go from there? If we unsustainably, plant more and more timber, we might go from one crisis, trying to fix one thing, to a different crisis, which, like you mentioned, could be a biodiversity loss. It could be, not enough timber to kind of meet the demand for the future. And the question, there has to be locally sourced materials along with timber to reinforce timber, along with other materials which can make it structurally sound. So the question about the structure integrity of the building comes into question. Second, we can also think about how the end of life of this timber, material is, because timber we need to consider that timber is basically storing carbon, and if this material or the building which is made from timber is not going to sustain for a longer period of time, we might end up, incinerating the timber structure or whatever, which is basically going to, release more carbon. So this is something which I think, in short, I would just trying to say that timber could be something which could be used in the future. We could retrofit our current buildings. We could start building new buildings which include locally sourced carbon neutral materials or timber, for example, and go on from there.
Thank you. Jordan, do you want to develop more this discussion?
Sure. Well, I think it almost goes without saying, but I think first and foremost what we need to address is that we prevent further deforestation of any old growth or primary forests like the Amazon rainforest. They need to remain protected, and it's not just because they're carbon sinks, that help to prevent global warming from getting any worse, but also the biodiversity, those ecosystems that those forests support. And I think one of the best practices, and maybe this links back to the last session we had as well, it comes down to how we manage the land we've already cleared. So if we can prevent the further clearing of land and manage the land that we've already cleared better, through the methods we discussed for farming, one that didn't come up could also be through the use of genetically modified crops. I know that's a little bit taboo for some people, but I can almost guarantee that everyone at the table has at least consumed or, used them for something without even realizing. And through the use, like better land practices, we could, instead of having such large areas devoted to farming, potentially we can have larger areas devoted to secondary forests. So instead of having to clear all these primary forests, we can have more land devoted to secondary forests, and they don't have to all be for just tree culling as well. You can have some secondary forests that help with regeneration of some of the primary forests as well. But I think we have to think about how we use the land we've already cleared. We just can't afford to keep clearing any more land. It's irresponsible to the planet.
Yeah, and these questions are really related on GMOs and then farming and then where to put the forest. Ishan, do you?
Yeah, just to build off Jordan's point, I think if we are going to use timber as a sustainable building material, we need to manage how we harvest it from this already really strained resource of forests around the globe. And so some of the techniques we had mentioned in previous discussions can already be used, like machine learning of satellite images can be used to monitor cutting forestry practices and actually seek out illegal or unsustainable clear cutting of forests. And hydroponics can be used to take some of the strain off of land use for agriculture, so that can be forests can be used for harvesting timber or just as carbon sinks and habitats for biodiversity. But I think an important point when we're talking about deforestation and using timber as a resource is recognizing who is affected most by deforestation in terms of humans. And a lot of the deforestation is happening in the global south, around Malawi, Indonesia, Central and Southern Africa, and also around the Amazon. And the effects of clear-cutting forests and the reasons that are driving them are often related to poverty. So in these areas, other construction materials that we conventionally use are too expensive, and timber is a cheap alternative. We also lose a lot of forests here due to cash crops that are needed by locals to survive economically, where other economic opportunities aren't available. So in moving forward with these policies, we have to consider not only new science, but how we apply our new sustainable technologies in a just way so that everyone is able to benefit from them, especially the people who are at the frontier of what the climate crisis and our overexploitation of the Earth's resources, its harm, and how we can protect them from that.
Those are very also important and heavy topics, and talking about inequalities and who is suffering and who is benefits of also the progress that are being made in scientific solutions, of course, and making sure that everyone on the planet gets to profit from these developments, and also taking part of research. I think that is a very also important question when you recruit both researchers to your lab or to good research environments in general. The need for diversity and inclusiveness, both from regions, but also gender, and also to get different inputs. How do you reason when you recruit people to your lab?
Yeah, no, that's a very important, very critical question. I mean, one part I would say is that any academic that's had any success will tell you that the diversity of their lab will drive the success of the lab. And if anyone says otherwise, they're not being truthful. It is remarkable how you can bring people of different demographics, gender, any cultural basis, socio-demographic background. You bring as many different people into a lab, and it's the diversity of that lab that will, in and of itself, drive innovation. And it really does work. And the other way I can sort of point to this is if you talk to any academics right now who will tell you that because of the pandemic, because of COVID, it really closed down, for example, cultural diversities in labs because people could not move around the world. And it really had a significant impact on research innovation across many different labs, many different areas. And this is something which has been uniformly sort of found. So one thing which is critical, I would argue, it's critical for how we go forward in our scientific or engineering or other STEM-based subjects is we have to continue to push for diversity of research across all facets. And that is extraordinarily important. One other idea I would say that we also don't talk about, we've talked a little bit about it today, but is countries that have first world resources versus countries that do not have first world resources, and how we have to provide opportunities to people across the planet to actually get involved in innovation. That is not something that we have been particularly good at in science or STEM broadly, and it's something that we have to do. It's sort of democratizing science or democratizing innovation, and we have to do that if we're going to get the benefit out of the human race as it currently exists. We have to think about that.
Yeah, and I mean, these are really important points, especially on all the topics we have been discussing today that really concerns the whole planet and all of humanity, that we have a diverse group of researchers, innovators, and participating in the development of STEM areas. And for all of you who are listening, I think it's also very both important but also a lot of fun to say that research is one of the most internationally endeavor that you can do. It's not sitting on your own, but you actually get friends from all over the world. You can talk to anyone from anywhere because you are so fond of the same problem, so that you can actually discuss with anyone regardless of cultural barriers or languages or anything, which is fantastic as a science, as a unifier also, I think. But I think also that is very much what I like about the Nobel Prize, with having both the science and the Peace Prize and the spectrum of also humanism, which covers everything. But nature is also then like a role model. Nature and the planet is always there, and we people, we are doing crazy things, and we are exploring this planet as we now want, as the species that have maybe have most impact on the planet. But how important is nature What would you say, Hector, as an inspiration for research or in general when you look at nature compared to then STEM and innovation that you often see most as something diverse almost from nature?
I think nature is the one starting point we have in science. It's really this fundamental nature, this fundamental compound we have to start researching, right? It's our starting point. If we're referring to research as this human endeavor to learn, to solve problems, then research is really the human project, right? A scientific civilization. So we look at nature, and nature is our starting point. It's our ground zero, right? So just picture a stone. The way you carve that stone, it can evolve into a stone tool, right? And then you can use these tools to further cultivate your environment, from architecture to mining to this potentially infinite array of opportunities, array of progress that you can accomplish. And I mean, when you're asking me about nature and how we can use this as an inspiration, I think about biology. I think about evolution, right? About how homogeneity in an ecosystem is dangerous, right? We need diversity. And it's not only a social topic, but we see it in organisms and how this diversity of functions, of genes, is truly indispensable for sustainability, right? For this progress to increase our chances of survival. I see chemistry and I look at compounds, atoms, and how we really have this amazing collection of building blocks that we can manipulate at will, right? That we can potentially use to create a lot of compounds, a lot of solutions, a lot of catalysis to our current problems. So it's not a matter of whether we should look at nature for inspiration. Nature is inspiration. It's the one thing we have in this ever-changing world with so many variables. Nature is the one constant we have to start researching and to just drive this human scientific civilization.
So STEM is really about trying to explain nature almost. Nature is always there. But David, I'm very curious because when you got your Nobel Prize, that was something when I heard about it and learned more about it, it was like, oh, feels that wasn't this already discovered, sort of, because nature was so present there. Was nature a part of your, like, when you how did you come with the idea? Like,
did we steal it from nature?
Yeah.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
No, it was interesting. It was what we did was we found that small organic molecules, and as humans, we're all built of small organic molecules. The small organic molecules could do catalysis in a way. Nature actually uses big enzymes and other things. But ultimately, what was very interesting was we started using these small organic molecules. We found all these new catalytic reactions, and subsequently, people have now found that nature actually does some chemical reactions using some of these ideas, which means that we didn't actually invent them. Nature invented them. We just coincidentally actually came across them. But I'll tell you one thing really quickly, which is right now we have this new approach. This is going across all of chemistry, but people are looking for new ways to make medicines. And in medicines, there's been a realization that we have to introduce these new types of what's called sp3 carbons. It turns out it's really important for success in medicines. And we didn't have really great ways of thinking about how to make these types of bonds. And one thing that's been realized recently is nature knows how to make these bonds. And so in labs, many people are now looking at this and realizing we can literally sort of steal these ideas. Steal's the wrong word, kidnap. We can remove these ideas or extract those ideas or mimic these ideas from nature, and it works. And we can do it in a lab, and it's allowing new medicines to be made which incorporate these types of carbons when nature had or has already demonstrated you could do it for completely different purposes. But it was a beautiful example of why being aware, being knowledgeable, and thinking about the way nature works is so important if you're going to take some of those ideas and think about it for our own innovations.
I mean, that's really fantastic final words also here, where we have nature as the basis of everything, and nature is a source of inspiration, and nature is what we are trying to explain and understand, everyone who is working with science and innovation, and we're also trying to improve things, of course, and that is fantastic, I think, that is also what we are celebrating here this week, that science is making the world a better place, and it continues doing so, and the problems of today are solved by the laureates of tomorrow. So I think it's really something that we are celebrating today and this whole week here in Stockholm, and together with you laureates who are really like personating the things that we are really wanted to celebrate and discuss this week. So taking this as an opportunity to discuss these topics is really fantastic, I think. So thank you so much for all your contribution. It has been an honor and a privilege for me to be here and host this roundtable discussion with you today. It's really fantastic to have the whole world by the table and the young people that you represent. Thank you so much for that. And I would like to thank you for this, and I would like, of course, thank you, David, for contributing with your passion, knowledge, and insights into both research and science. Thank you so much for that. And the Swedish Federation of Young Scientists want to say thank you to the Nobel Prize Museum and UNICEF. And I hope you who have been viewing Minds of the Future feel both inspired and engaged to create your own contribution to a brighter future. Please, do not let this conversation end here. You can download a free of use appendix at the Stockholm International Youth Science Seminar website. And you can bring that to your classroom, science club, or family and friends dinner to continue the conversation on how to make our future more sustainable and bright. And don't forget, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. You matter. Thank you to all of you, and thank you.